Welcome to episode 5 of the Shiny Things Improv podcast. I'm your host, Aaron Balakchin, and this is where I get to pick the brains of my favourite improvisers. Today's guest is Alex Holland, head teacher at the Free Association in London. Alex has been improvising for more than a decade and is one of my absolute favourite people to watch on stage. He is a master of finding hilarious games, characters and patterns and playing them in thoughtful and surprising ways. My team Nana were also lucky enough to have him as our coach for our stint as an FA Herald team, and his light, playful approach to coaching really helped take the pressure off and find the fun in our scenes. He's got so much knowledge to share and I had a real blast chatting to him. Here's a taste of what we've got coming up.
Like when you start out week one of taking like an improv, your very first improv class, the teacher will be like, improv is all about listening. And you're like, great, got it. Okay, it's all about listening. And then after you've been doing it for like a decade, you're like, it's all about listening, isn't it? A lot of my notes are just like, do less. Often just, you don't need to, you're doing too much. Like you're panicking, you're trying to throw in 5, 10, 15 things that you're like, one of these has got to work. You're like, you can just relax and just do one thing and that's it. That's all we need from you. I think that's worth remembering if you're teaching as well, that you are demonstrating the skills and the art form that you are teaching as you're teaching. The crucial thing, I think, that is important is like you can get better at it and you can learn it. You can learn it. It's a skill you learn. Any animosity towards any other improv school or theatre, it's weird. It's so weird to do that. You just plough that sort of furrow, for one of a better, unfortunately to have to use a farming analogy. I don't know why I apologise about it.
Alex Holland, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having us, Aaron. Welcome to you. Welcome to your show. It felt polite to say welcome back to you as well.
That was very polite. I appreciate it. You have been improvising for 13 years now?
I think it's something like that, and I think that someone will tell me that's wrong, and I've over-egged it, but it's definitely over 10.
And you're now the head teacher at the Free Association in London. How did you first start doing improv?
I started because I was doing stand-up in and around London, and then someone recommended an improv class, and I thought I was taking it to sort of help my stand-up in some way, and then I just got really, really enjoyed doing the improv. And then after a while I realised that I was not looking for any more stand-up gigs, I was just looking for opportunities to perform improv. So I just realised that clearly I wasn't enjoying stand-up that much, and I was much more enjoying doing improv. And I met a ton of very good improvisers who we all started around the same time, and who many of them I still perform with and do stuff with. So we all just gelled and really got into it like from the get-go, which probably helped quite a lot. But yeah, so I came at it from stand-up originally, and then was like, this is more fun to me than stand-up at the moment.
What is it about improv that you think makes it more fun than stand-up?
I think that there is, I don't think it is more fun. I think I've changed my mind, it's not more fun. So the reason I was enjoying it more, I think, is that comedically I found often that I felt like I was often funnier off stage than I was on stage as a stand-up. And I felt like the material I was writing, I would say this is now like comedic journey stuff, but finding your comedic voice or whatever. It's the stand-up material I was writing was trying to write stand-up material. I think this is now looking back on it. I wasn't aware of this, I don't think, at the time. I was writing material that I thought was good stand-up material, but was not actually me just being what I thought was funny and was doing that was funny. And so improv, because you're doing it in the moment and you're just reacting all the time, I just seem to gel with much quicker and go, I'm finding actually what I find really funny a lot easier, and I'm finding what I'm doing much funnier than the stuff that I'm doing when I perform stand-up. It was just a no-brainer to be like, I love performing these people that I've met, and I want to keep doing this. And some of the funny stuff I feel like I've done, or some of the funny sort of discoveries of scenes or characters or games and things are coming out of this. So that's what I just wanted to follow and do, because it was just really joyful to do. There's obviously tons of reasons that it's a more joyful way of performing, because you're performing with a group of people that you hopefully trust and admire, and peers and things like that who you want to perform with. Whereas stand-up is much more of you, obviously, as we all know, getting up on stage by yourself and being like, I hope this thing I wrote in a notepad is funny, and when I say it out loud to a group of people. So like the performance aspect itself is quite joyful, and it just felt, I was just really, really fascinated by it and fascinated by developing at it and getting better at it. And it just all leaned into the stuff that I find funny. And I was very fortunate to start with loads of people who I also think are very funny, perform with them a lot.
And you were working in customer research at that point, is that right?
Yeah, I was doing like focus groups and data research for market research. Yeah.
And at what point did you realise that you wanted to make improv your career?
I think that, I just like making comedy. And so any way that I could sort of do that more. So like essentially what happened was the opportunity arrived to potentially start doing that. It was like, obviously, if I can just be paid to run classes and to teach and to coach, and then to like run, like write syllabuses and work on stuff with teachers and help teachers develop our syllabuses and things like that, and schedule classes and things, all that sort of stuff. I was like, well, yeah, great. I'll just be working on the thing that I find really fun and really interesting and really fascinating to do. I guess it still isn't an option for somewhere you can make money, particularly. I feel like fortunately found the one job that exists that does pay you to do that. So I've been very fortunate in that sense. And I realized, like, again, all this comedic stuff is all links into, like, when I was at university, I made sketches with people for like our final film project was a sketch show. And really we just had ideas with sketches and certain lines, but we just filmed it and then improvised loads of the content of the sketches. And it was just so much fun, and the most fun I've had. And the stuff we made with it was just so funny. It made us laugh so much. So I've always been trying to recapture that in some way. And improv is just that, except you're just doing it live in front of people. You're making it up on the spotlight. So it has been like, this is the feeling of doing it. Was like, if I can find a way to keep doing this, and I can find a way that like I can be paid something for it, great. That's great. That's great for me.
Have you found new levels to improv through having to write curriculums and really think about it in such a educational way?
Yeah, and I think it is endlessly fascinating, comedically improvising, because there's just so much to it. There's so many potential ways you could do it, or what works and what doesn't work. And it's not even like there's any, having to write syllabuses and work on certain things and go like, what's going to be helpful for students, and then rewrite stuff and see how students are doing when they come out and what they're doing in auditions, and going, what do we actually need to work on? And you can get there's so much theory and talk you can get really bogged down in, which is all I also find really fascinating. And then there's just going back to like fundamentals again, or going to like different ways of performing, or finding different sort of types of forms or things that you enjoy. It's sort of ever evolving, and it involves, so in short, yeah. Yeah. And I think because there's also what I think is interesting, I don't know if you found this, Aaron, through like coaching and teaching and stuff, is that if you have an idea of going, I'm going to work on this. Let's work on this thing. I've got this thing in my head. We'll do this exercise and we'll work on this. And then you sometimes realize when you put it into action and run people through it, you're like, this isn't going at all how I thought it would go. And people aren't doing what I thought they would do when I gave them this. So you're constantly having to adjust and figure out what's working and what's not. And also improv is really, the art form is process. You're just showing process over product. You're like, there isn't an end product. The process itself is the product. The process is performing. It's part performing, part writing on the spot. So you're working on like all the different angles, essentially comedically, of what makes stuff work comedically. So there's so many different ways you can look at it and how it relates to other sort of comedic or creative pursuits. So I do find that there's always new sort of levels to it, or new things to be discovered. I think really simply, and I think a lot of people, I'm sure, say and feel the same thing, is that like when you start out week one of taking like your very first improv class, the teacher will be like, improv is all about listening. And you're like, great, got it. Okay, it's all about listening. And they're like, you got to listen in scenes. You're like, I got it. Yeah, I'll listen. Then you do a load of exercise on listening. You're like, yeah, I get it. You got to listen loads. And then after you've been doing it for like a decade, you're like, it's all about listening, isn't it, really? And then you finally go, yes, I see. It's like that sort of, is it like a Buddhist thing? Like when the student is ready, the teacher appears. There's endless stuff and advice you'll have been given in improv that you sometimes can't really put into practice until like way later. You go, oh yeah, it's that, isn't it? It's that thing that I was told in the first year of doing this. is actually what's really useful. So I also find that really fascinating, to be able to just go back to what are often fundamentals, and what often I think when people get to a certain stage, like they don't want to do more stuff on listening and yes-anding. You're like, actually, like you need to do more stuff on listening and yes-anding. Often that's where problems are coming in. So that's fascinating as well. On top of all the sort of theory of sort of game of the scene, or point of view, or character, or relationship, or a narrative, or story, all this stuff is also like fascinating. But yeah, there's so much to it, I think, to pick apart.
Yeah. I often find myself, especially I've been doing a bit of teaching and coaching, and like just remembering being like, oh yeah, I don't yes and always. It's like literally I'm telling these foundation students, so here's the very basic principle of improv, yes and then I'm like, oh yeah, sometimes I don't do that.
I think it's a super common thing if you're teaching or coaching improv, is you give someone a note and then in your head you go, I need to take that note. You're like, yes, that I do. I've watched in the past students do things on stage that are like sometimes the sort of things I do, and watched it not work and been like, that's why it doesn't work when I do it as well. It's really informative. Yeah, so there's endlessly things like that. Or just so much stuff where you're like, yeah, it's this, isn't it? And then you run loads of stuff and you're like, no, it's not that. I thought it was that. And then finding another avenue to it. And also as a performer yourself, like developing and finding, I think you go through little phases of different things. You might get into like bad habits or good habits in certain things, and then you'll develop out of those or find something else. Or sometimes your just sense of humor changes a little bit, or even what's like in comedy. Is that the right phrase? Something, there's like a sort of, what am I trying to say? Not in. What's in? What's the sort of like a trend or something, I guess maybe. Be certain comedy trends or stuff that happens in improv a lot, and then that might change a little bit, or something else might start to happen. So it's endlessly, just constantly developing. You're just constantly on the balls of your feet all the time. That's the point of it. You're just supposed to be doing that. And there's, tons to sort of be aware of on and off stage with what's happening with that, as a teacher, as a performer, as like somebody who's just learning, auditioning, or doing rehearsals or whatever. There's just constant like more bits to sort of find or realize you can work on or adjust or whatever.
Yeah, I've also found coaching, it's often such a small adjustment to a scene. Often the scenes seem to have everything, and then it's just a very small adjustment to make it much, much more funny. But then when I'm on stage, I'm like, I don't know. How long, or does that ever, if you've been teaching long enough, do you get to the point where you can note yourself in real time?
I think that like space opens up in your brain a bit more to be able to go, it's muscle memory really, so you have more space to be like, or even just more confidence to go, that's not working, I'm just going to do this then, or whatever. Or just a lot of it is just getting the sort of confidence to just say what you're thinking on stage. I think is a fascinating element of it. So like if something is, you're like, this isn't quite working, to sort of not by saying exactly that, but in some words be able as a character to be like, I feel like the energy in this room is, but I don't know, there'll be something that you can comment on that's just touching upon something that you are just actually feeling, and that everyone in the room is probably actually feeling in some way, that you can feel the confidence to say that in some way, or the confidence to try something new and not worry about it falling apart, or and then also sometimes you can be like, I think I'm doing everything right and nothing's really working, and that's also fine. that's also an element of it. Sometimes you'll watch scenes, and if you're coaching or teaching or whatever, and be like, they're technically doing everything fine, but like, I don't know why, I don't know what it is. Something's not, I'm not enjoying this scene. I don't know what it is. And sometimes you can pick that apart endlessly, and sometimes you have to be like, great, let's just move on to the next scene. So I think I'm just going to say this, Aaron. I'm going to say the same things over and over again, which is that there's so much in this. There's so much to learn. It's so interesting, which you'd hope I'd say, I guess, as the head teacher.
It wouldn't be great if you're like, no, actually, there's not much to it. You've either got it or you haven't.
But I think that is interesting. That is also interesting that there isn't tons to it. You can pick at lots of little things, but often all of the sort of theory and stuff you get into is trying to bring you back to, you're on stage with someone and you're looking at them and you're trying to just like yes and make this work, and then find something like fun to invest in this scene. And that's it. And a lot of coaching and teaching is often just teaching you to get out of your own way a little bit and just relax a bit, or get it into your muscle memory a bit more, not panic so much, not try so hard. A lot of my more, if I'm like coaching a Harold team or more advanced students, then a lot of my notes are just like, do less. Often just, you don't need to, you're doing too much. Like, you're panicking, you're trying to throw in 5, 10, 15 things that you're like, one of these has got to work. You're like, you can just relax and just do one thing, and that's it. That's all we need from you. Yeah, and so that's it. I think that there ultimately can be at a certain point, like your head is filled with different ideas, and you actually just need to relax and trust that it's in there and just not force it too much, really.
Do you think improv is for a certain type of person?
I think that you can be predisposed to get it quickly. Sometimes because, like, for me, I think some of the stuff in improv was like, this is actually how I muck about with my friends when I was at school. So, like, I'm actually already sort of a little bit, or like you already joke around with your family in a certain way, or there's something in your life, or you just really like comedians or comedy that you may or may not realize are actually come out of like improv stuff. There's a lot of stuff born out of people who are improvisers and then write in a way that like appeals to sort of them as improvisers. And so then when you join a class, you're a little bit like, I get this. I've been working out on this without realizing it. I've been working out on this. But I think the same, you can say that I believe that for like all creativity. You can be predisposed to it in some way. But I think that you can get it and develop, and you can get, like, the crucial thing I think that is important is like, you can get better at it and you can learn it. You can learn it. It's a skill you learn. It's a skill that you get better at. So whilst there might be some people who are like immediately drawn to it and immediately love it and immediately like, I get it, I'm enjoying this, I'm very anti the myth that like you've either got it or you don't have it. Like, some people are geniuses and some people just don't have it. It's a skill, it's a muscle you train yourself to get better at. And that's sort of treating it with the respect it deserves as like an art form. It's like, it's a skill. If I want to get better at it, I'll try and get better at it. And it's also why it's hard to sometimes, because it's so pervasive, that you're either funny or you're not funny. You're funny or you're not funny. You're a good performer, you're not a good performer. You're boring, you're interesting. Like, these things that you can feel trapped in as a human being. And you can sort of like fall into that panic that you're like, maybe I just don't have it, maybe I just can't do it. So that's why it can be very difficult to ask students to retake a level, because they hear like, you haven't got it, you can't do it, you're not funny, what you're doing doesn't work. Whereas really, like, what you're trying to say as a teacher is, you can get this. I'm asking you to retake because you are capable of getting this and nailing this theory or whatever it is we're doing in this course. And that's sort of an important thing, that it has to be that. You can't just be like, you've got it or you don't have it. So I do think people can be predisposed and get it off the bat much more quickly. Some people can just be more comfortable with being silly on stage, where they're just more confident at those sorts of things. What I find very satisfying is watching. It's why I sort of was drawn to the FA when it started, was because we talk about like why something works, why something's funny and why maybe it isn't funny, or why it's funny but it didn't work, or what you need to like. You can pick apart what is and isn't working, and it also, because that theory works for improv, it also works for writing. If you're writing a comedy sketch, like, it's the same theory, it's the same approach to like there's something here. Why isn't this popping yet? Why isn't this working? And when you start doing that, you can often see. This is what I find very interesting. You can often see performers who have been able to get by just being big and loud and expressive on stage, and they're like incredible performers, visually incredible performers, very committed, excellent comedic actors. But you can watch them start to you can see that they're sort of relying on just being able to like do something silly with very little thought to it on stage. And then you see people who are maybe a little bit quieter, who just suddenly it clicks with them and they suddenly start making moves. They're not stealing the limelight. They're not becoming bigger performers necessarily and suddenly becoming big clown performers. But they clearly get what we're doing, and then they start doing moves you like. You get it, great. I can see when someone gets it, when they get what we're doing, what the point of playing game, or trying to create a scene that has just one comedic element to it that you're trying to explore, develop, or heighten or something. And I think that's interesting, because then I personally think that's great to have people who maybe didn't come in thinking that they were destined to be a performer or whatever, suddenly see that they have a skill and they understand this as a concept. And sometimes that can be harder for people who are maybe more naturally predisposed to being bigger performers on stage, to be given notes where they're like, you're actually not listening, you've stopped listening, you're just focusing on yourself and you're not investing in the scene. And that can often be a turning point for people where you're like, that they need to take on notes that make them a bit more of a disciplined like player in some way. Depending on what you're doing as well. I think at the FA, that's what we push towards. There'll be other schools that are just like, you got to come out, you got to be big, you got to be silly. That's what we're looking for. And obviously you need a bit of both. The Billy Merritt and Will Hines' Pirate Robot Ninja book is frustratingly such a good analogy for literally what I'm talking about, that I end up talking about this to students sometimes. And I'm like, it's just say Pirate Robot Ninja, just use what they came up with, because that is so clear and such a nice way of putting it, for sure.
What makes the FA approach different to other schools?
I think it's much more, I don't know how different it is to like all other schools. There's lots of stuff. There'll be lots of overlap, I think, with particular schools. Anything that's been set up in the sort of looking to UCB will teach game in a similar way, teach premise and game in a similar way to the way we're teaching it. And they're all, and you'll sort of, find people that focus more on that, or find people that focus more on relationship and character stuff. But they'll all sort of be, again, they're all trying to do the same thing ultimately. It's like to make you more consistently watchable on stage. And it's just whether you sort of, which sort of one you lean towards. But I mean, the answer is always that all of the advice is usually correct in some respect, is usually useful. If it's helpful to you, then it's good advice. But I guess with the FA it's game focused, so it's game of the scene. It's that we teach premise, in a way that I really liked, which wasn't done before, wasn't drilled quite as clearly, which is that if you've got an opening, you're making the audience watch the opening, then you better use it. You better use the stuff in that, and you better not just pluck a word that somebody said. You better pick an idea that you can start a scene with. And if you're starting a scene with a funny idea that you've got from a monologue, from an opening, whatever it is, then just make that work. Set it up so that that's got the best sort of longevity to work, and like you just plough that sort of furrow, for one of a better. Unfortunately, to have to use a farming analogy. I don't know why I apologise for that. I was like, I wish I wasn't saying.
How dare you use a farming analogy, Alex?
No,
on an improv podcast.
No, farming. Are you kidding me? They're so different. It's crazy to try and relate those things in any way whatsoever. So I found that I found that really appealing, and that there's sort of on-game moves and games that are just distracting you from what the fun is, and like you can panic and be like, this isn't enough, I've got to add something else in. It's like, you're fine, like just take your time. You've got one funny idea, like you don't need to be ploughing multiple furrows. I'm sorry, I can't stop. You don't need to be ploughing 5 furrows, plough 1 furrow, please. So that I found, that's sort of what we focus on more, which I think that we sort of focus on that the most, I think, of any school in London. We focus on that specifically. Like, that's the sort of part of the, like, at some point you need to understand that's what we're trying to do. But I think you also, like with any improv theatre, I think you develop a house style in some way. And that's what I guess with like trends, or like what's comedically happening, is that you start to just develop a style that like improvises that people really like, or ways that people like playing together start to come into the like house style in some way as well. But we do, so it'll still be game focused, but there'll also be a lot of, I guess the other thing is it's game focused, but there's point of view. So what's the character's comedic engine, essentially? Like every character, you should be able to find some sort of comedic engine that makes them interesting, that allows you to keep playing it. And also playing the voice of reason. I think that's something we drill quite hard as well. That's like sometimes it's funnier if somebody's like, I don't think that's a good idea. It says that's just a.
How would you describe Game of the Scene to someone that didn't understand what it was?
You can just say if you don't know what I'm talking about. Sorry, you said Game of the Scene. But I do find there's often like a sort of like slightly grey area in lots of people's minds about exactly what game is. And I think it does confuse people for a while when they're learning. And I guess it is also interesting because I've heard people sometimes talk about, they meet people from other theatres or something. Just to say, like, if anyone has any animosity towards any other improv school or theatre, it's weird. It's so weird to do that. So when I hear about anyone that's going, oh, you teach that, we don't teach that, we hate it, whatever, I'm like, what? Why? Like, everyone's trying to it's such a funny, silly, niche art form that we all really love. It's so funny to draw any lines in the sand, like. And also because all the advice essentially is just trying to get you to be like, what's working in your scene? Do that more. Whatever is that working? Do that more. If it's the relationship, like invest in the relationship more. If it's your character, let's give that character more stuff to do. So game is really just trying to, and just to clear this up for you, I'll write it down as well and leave it behind.
Yeah, if you could, that would be great.
It's just what's the funny pattern that you're repeating in the scene. And I think I've started using the word game less and just interchanging it with lots of different things that I'm saying, like, what's fun? What's fun and what are we enjoying? What's funny? What's making you laugh? We obviously talk about, as with shiny things, like we talk about like what's shiny, like what's making us laugh, what's standing out, what's fun, what's the pattern, what are we laughing every time something happens. There's so many, it's just you're going, that's working in your scene. So like my recommendation is you try and find a way to do that again. And often the note is you remember to do it again. And often the note is remember to stop doing it quite so much and only do it a couple of times. And sometimes the note is stop doing that now and you're going to wait 2 minutes and you're not allowed to do it again for 2 minutes. But ultimately, you're just finding like what's working and doing it again. That's the simplest I would describe it. Because you can get very heady about game and what is it? It's a point of view that gets played. Is it repeating the same catchphrase again multiple times in a scene? Sometimes it can be we can laugh every time someone says the word Satsuma in a scene. So that's fine. It doesn't have to be more theoretical than that. We laughed every time that character said Satsuma, and I don't care for getting it. You can, I think I used to when I started get into this a lot more, like, what is it so interesting about that? But really, if you're in a scene, you just need to know, like, get Tom to say Satsuma again. Set up a situation where he can say Satsuma, and now let's set up a situation where he shouldn't ever be saying Satsuma, and see if he can find a way to say Satsuma again. And it can just be as simple as that incredible analogy once again, or that incredible example. So it's just that, and I think that's what people get really, like, they really want to think about it. And sometimes it can be fun to dig into it and to think about why that's funny versus why is Satsuma funny? Why is Clementine not funny? Why isn't that funny? Why can't you just say orange? Why is it funny he said Satsuma? But ultimately, you're on stage and everyone laughed when he said Satsuma, and you're like, I'm going to say Satsuma again. I've also watched scenes where people are like, I got it. So my point of view is I like... this is what I find like quite fun when you can get stuck in the weeds of this. And they're like, I've said Satsuma and that's funny. Okay, so maybe my point of view is I love oranges. So my point of view is like I love vitamin C. They're like, great. So now I'm going to ask for something else that's vitamin C. They're like strawberry or whatever, and they'll say something else that's vitamin C, and no one like laughed at it at all. And you're like, you got to say Satsuma again. I know you've done the work in your head and you've really planned how to make this a sustainable character for a long period of time, but I've got to tell you, it's not funny when you say strawberry, and it is funny when you say Satsuma. I don't have anything else to add to that. At its simplest, it's just that. And it is no different to any other note that you should be giving in improv, which is like, focus on what's working, leave behind what isn't working. So that's it. Something funny, and you're doing it again.
I'd like to make sure you do keep all examples from now on to do with farming or growing fruit.
Yeah, yeah, that's close. I was trying to get away from farming, and yet still I was talking about harvests of Satsumas, something you famously harvest in autumn.
What do you think about improv as a practice for, say, mental health instead of a practice specifically for performance?
I think that it's great. I think what you're learning, if you're doing good improv, you're just learning good communication. You're learning good communication and good, you won't believe this, it's about listening again. You're learning good listening, good communication. You're learning how to play. You're playing. You're just mucking about and playing. And that's valuable whether you go on to perform it on stage and charge people money, whether you go to just do jams, whether you just love doing rehearsals of it. If you only use it occasionally, it's like warm-ups that you do before something else that you do completely different. So I think that it's valuable in its own right, because sort of being good at improv is all... I think it is really valuable for that, because it teaches you just how to... listen, not focus on yourself so much, drop your ideas, like build on what someone else is saying, genuinely sort of be interested in what someone else is doing and saying. And sometimes when you have students who are, like, it all needs to feed into each other, I think, because you have students that are like often just come into scenes and they're often just coming with a problem and they're just saying a problem. Someone wants to do something that problem. I've got a reason we can't do that actually. And that's often... because, like, in their life, they're often doing that probably, or they're quite contrary in real life. To people are quite contrary. It's like you will benefit from applying what I'm saying to you in improv to just your conversations as a whole. It's just a nice way to communicate and play with each other. So I think it is just a valuable thing to be doing. You don't need to be aiming to be a comedian to enjoy doing improv, or to do improv, or to be allowed to do improv, or allowed to perform improv. There's a certain point where you're like, can you charge money for people to watch you do this. And some people will be able to, and some people won't be there yet. And they could be there if they wanted to work at it, but how much do they want to work at it versus how much they want to perform? That's the point where but you don't want to be like, well, you can't do this then, because it's not, like, unlike any other sort of creative pursuit, comedically, I think, you can just, in the performance itself, the process is enjoyable. It's process of a product. That's all just good stuff. Like, any creative pursuit is trying to tell you the same thing. Anything in your life is trying to any sort of philosophy on how to live your life well is trying to tell you the same thing. Meditation is trying to tell you the same thing. Mindfulness is trying to tell you the same thing. Like, appreciate the moment you're in now. Just focus on what you're doing now and just see what comes up. Respond and listen and be present and all of that. That's all you're doing in improv. That's ultimately all it boils down to is that. And as well as all of the talk about game and theory and other things you're trying to do and ploughing furrows and so on, you're ultimately just, I'm in a space, this is what's happening, I'm present in that space. Even stuff like control what you can control, don't worry about what you can't control. You can't control how other people perform, what they do. All you can control is like how you respond to what you're given. That's it. And those are all just hugely beneficial. So I think sometimes the problem can be that, yes, it gets to a point, and particularly if you're going through levels of like a school where we're like, right, now we're going to work on this skill, and this is like how to make your shows good for an audience. And some people start to pull away because they're not enjoying it, or they don't feel like they get it yet. And it's a shame for those people to feel like they aren't allowed to do it anymore, because there shouldn't be any gatekeeping to sort of just doing it as a pursuit. But there ultimately does become a point where the gatekeeping is, I don't think you're good enough to be on this team yet, or to charge this much money, or people won't pay this much money to come and see you. And that's sort of but that doesn't mean you should have stopped by that point. So trying to find opportunities to do it and perform, that's where you can get a bit stuck, I think, or worry about, or just get into it and really like it and be really set on, like, I've got to get into a team, I've got to do this, I've got to do a show, when you can be a bhow just enjoy doing the things you're enjoying. And then also, ultimately, even if you get to do a show and charge people money for it, you're not really currently in how like well-known improv is, or how big it necessarily gets. Like, you're probably not going to make any money from doing that either. So even if you manage to do all those things, you better just enjoy the process, because there isn't really anything on the other end particularly. You better enjoy the personal development, how you're developing and learning your comedic voice and stuff, because there's not like a big paycheck at the end of it.
And not unless they come for your job, Alex.
Yeah, exactly. And I've already got the only job, and I'm not going anywhere, so there's no chance.
What do you think makes a good improv teacher?
I think knowing that you're sort of doing the same skill you're doing when you perform improv, really. It's all just connected to me. I'm like, good facilitators are good improvisers, can be good facilitators. Because you're just in the room, you're listening, you've got stuff you want to work on or exercise you're going to do, and you're just listening and responding to the room. And I think that, it's the same thing that makes people able to sort of actually react to the room, or listen, or be present, or genuinely listen to what students are saying and respond to it and adapt. It's the same skill. I think that's worth remembering if you're teaching as well, that you are demonstrating the skills and the art form that you are teaching as you're teaching. The process of teaching is demonstrating it at the same time. Even in the sense of like, how do you sort of play with the students? What are you doing when you're doing the warm-ups? What are you enjoying? Do stuff that's making you laugh. If they're seeing you enact the stuff that you're talking about them doing in the class, that's it. And also that can be sort of quite relieving as a teacher as well, that you're just there to sort of improvise and be a part of it and help facilitate it in some way. Because I think you can feel like you can only teach if you know everything, and you can answer all the questions that come in, and like you have to be the sort of font of all knowledge, and that can be that's not true. You're just there to help guide people in that space towards like better stuff. And there'll be students or teams that will want to sort of let you know how much they know when they're in the class or in the coaching session or whatever, and they want to sort of get answers from you. They want to get final answers on what the correct thing is to do in this situation, and do you know this bit of theory, and have you read this book by this person and taken a class with this person? And there'll always be people that might want to are trying to test maybe the limits or something in some way, but ultimately you don't need to know everything. You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be there. You need to know enough to help make their scenes feel more fun for them to do and feel more enjoyable to watch. That's it. Whatever's nudging them towards those things.
You ran a workshop in London and in Berlin called Not Being Funny. I, for a while, was really trying to follow that sort of mantra And I think, as I've mentioned before on this show, I found myself really good at not being funny
Right.
and being real in a scene and going through the scene and being like, I'm not being funny. And I thought this was when it was supposed to, that was supposed to lead to it being funny.
That's
but
the secret.
What do you think?
That's funny, but is that sort of it? You're like, I was doing this like a little trick. I thought I'd learned the trick, and at the end of the trick, I actually secretly was funny, but like you're just doing it. That's it. That's part of the problem, is you're always like, I'm doing it and I'm still not funny. Like, yeah, I don't think maybe that's not... yeah, all of these things are like, well, I did the thing you said and I'm not hilarious yet. Even like students or whatever, like, I just did what you said and that didn't bring the house down. I'm sorry I didn't have the trick to it.
What do you think the pitfalls to following that approach are? Is it that I, like you say, maybe I'm subconsciously like, or maybe consciously being like, oh, I want the trick, the payoff to the trick, rather than just committing to it. I also wonder whether there's this desire to sort of play a bit TJ and Davey, where you're like, we're going to go slow. And I think one of the pitfalls of that is that by going slow, you stop making choices. And so you end up in sort of treading water rather than making choices, because you're in your mind, you're like, we're just going slow. I don't have to do the thing. And maybe there's that also when you're like, okay, I don't have to be funny, which maybe you're then subconsciously converting into, I don't have to make choices. Is that something that you've seen?
Yeah, I think that, because it's not just like, because my feeling with it, and this is still going back to fundamentals and what I think I end up like coaching people on a lot still, is that that's often the part of the scene. Often if the funny bit isn't working, it's not actually your problem with doing the funny bit, it's your problem with doing the real bit. The real bit is often the issue. And then when I run this, I'm generally just trying to get people to say, what would you really say? I think TJ and Dave do the same thing when they're doing workshops or whatever. Often my favourite note to give actually to someone in the scene when they're doing this is like, I don't believe you. I don't believe what you just said. Like, I can see how you're reacting to it instinctively. And I feel like you're saying what you think you should say rather than saying what you genuinely actually feel, or how you would feel if someone said this to you. Even if that's quite an embarrassing response, or even if that's or you think it's not a funny response, and it's seeing that stuff is really interesting. So sometimes people can think if they are sort of not being funny, I think you're right. It can be like, I just won't make choices and I'll just be really slow. And it's like, well, you're still creating. You've got to create, but you're trying to create without expectation of that getting a laugh. I guess it's almost another way of looking at it might be like, be interesting. Don't worry about being funny. Just worry about being interesting. Because to me as a performer, like, this is the way I take it. If I'm on stage or I'm stressed on the back line, I haven't been in the scene yet or something, or I'm worried about something that's to do with this show, often the stress I'm feeling is that I am putting pressure on myself that when I step out on stage, the first thing I say is got to be funny. The first thing I say, the first thing I do in the scene is got to be funny. And that's very, very restrictive way. That just makes you restricted as being creative, as improvising. And if I remind myself, like, I'm just there to invest in the scene and create the scene, like, it's not, I don't have to try and be funny, and it's fine. And I think that you can step on with a lot more confidence because you're not under the sort of, because the audience can smell when you're desperate to make them laugh and you're nervous about whether they're going to laugh or not. But if they see you come out and you don't care whether they laugh because you're just investing in the scene, investing in the sort of reality of the scene in some way, not necessarily being boring, not making choices, but sort of not worried about being funny and just worried about trying to sort of make sense of what's going on and try and be a part of it in some way and add to it in some way. That's a much more confident position you come on from, and the audience trust you. The audience trust you if you come out like that. It's painful to watch someone come on and try and get a laugh. It's engaging to watch someone come on and just be very present in the scene they're in and very responsive and listening and adding and responding. And then the biggest sort of laughs you might get will be from something you didn't expect to be funny when you said it. You didn't expect that was going to be a funny reaction. You just said something honestly. That's often way funnier than when you see someone like planning to do a joke they're going to do. And you can get very good at that. It is a feedback. The danger of it, and the reason I want to do it as a workshop, is that because laughter is such an immediate feedback of, well done, an immediate dopamine rush or whatever, great, I'm doing a correct job. You are learning that every time you do a funny, then you're rewarded for it, and then that's your job. You've got to do funnies more. That's what you're supposed to be doing. But then you sort of lose sight of the fact that, like, you actually just need to be trusting the process, and the funnies will come out of that. And then you start to trip yourself up because you're coming in to make jokes, and you will make jokes at the expense of your scene partners, at the expense of the scene, because in your head you're like, that's the most important thing, is I've got to come in with a joke. And ultimately you may not come in as much, because if you haven't been in yet, if you're a more nervous performer, you might just be worried on the back line instead of coming in. So I think that, so a lot of it is that. And I think for lots of performers, it helps to have that in mind. I mean, I'm here to invest. I'm here to invest in what I think is interesting and to be a part of this scene and be present. I'm not here to get a laugh when I step in. That is just a trap. It's the same trap if you start a premise initiation, I think. It's so satisfying to come off the back line with the premise initiation and say something that gets a laugh immediately. To have crafted a joke in your head from whatever the opening was, step on stage, get a big laugh from that first thing you said, which is really funny, that you learn, like, that's how you do premise. I just step out and I say the funniest thing, but you're about to do a whole scene. This is the starting point for an entire scene. If you come out being like, there's this one little interesting thing I want to play with, my first line might not be funny of this premise, but my last line should be funny by virtue of, again, trust the process. Like, you don't have to write in your head on the back line. Trust the process that you and your scene partners and your team will create something funny. And again, it's fundamentals again. It's back to like week 1 of your first beginner class. You as a team are going to create something that is more than the sum of its parts. If you're just coming out writing lines in your head to say, it's never going to be as funny as all the stuff that will be created by genuinely trusting and believing the process of yes and actually works. Like, I'm bringing one brick, I'm just building one brick at a time, and something will come that's better than me writing this thing on the back line in my head. So ultimately, when you're doing that, you're just not trusting improv. I think there are some improvisers or some performers who I think, actually, I'm like, I don't think you actually trust or believe this art form works. I don't think you're doing improv in your saying you're doing improv, but actually what you're doing is learning how to craft jokes in your head very quickly that will make the audience laugh and win the audience over. I'm like, actually good improv comes out of playing with people you love, performing in a way that is like trying to build each other's ideas up and discover where you get to, investing in the reality, having surprises, knowing when to invest in these silly, funny things, when to go back to reality, trying to like follow all this stuff that is just happening in front of you, and just believing that yes and actually works. But if you just come out making jokes and getting laughs for doing gags and doing funnies, like, honestly, I think you should probably have a think about like whether you actually believe this works or not, because like it does work. It works. That's why people keep doing it. But it's very easy to get lulled into a like, yeah, I do improv. Like, you're just writing stand-up material in your head. That's not the same. It's not the same thing. I think it's very interesting. But yeah, ultimately, back to basics, like, it works. It works if you are just listening to your team and building on the stuff you're doing as a team and investing in it. Like, it creates comedy. So, like, trust that works. And not being funny is that. You aren't the like keystone to this entire performance. It's not like, thank God you knew how to do the funny thing. It's like, you remember your job is to figure this out together, not to just come in with an answer to it. You're not here to fix it. You're not here to be, thank God I was funny. Because also, this is a very long answer, I'm sorry. And I've had a bridge metaphor, I made an arch metaphor, not a farm metaphor.
Very disappointing. You broke the game, Alex. You broke the game. I have been through various stages of making improv everything and then feeling like it's too much, or really wanting and trying to push. I feel like maybe there's this like fine line where you need to care enough to motivate you to keep doing it, but not too much that it then like curtails your performance because you're caring too much and you're too worried about what might happen.
Yeah, I think it's the same. A lot of my teaching is trying to take the pressure off. I'm trying to make things less lofty and sort of like it's the game of the scene. You've got to understand this versus the contrast between the voice of reason and the unusual thing or whatever. I'm just like, that's why I'm often just like, what's funny? What's making us laugh? Let's just take the pressure off. Because a lot of this is down to, like caring a lot about how well you're doing. It's that same thing. You're just like, this show better go well. Oh my God, this show better go well. I'm right. I need this to go well, like to prove that my self-worth and stuff. And then you just ultimately, even if you have a good show, you're not satisfied. If you have a good, if you like blow the roof off, you'd still be like, I just feel like I'm not quite where I want to be. Like your mindset is wrong for doing it. So it is trying to It is trying when you're on stage to care like 50% less than you can than you are. You should care about doing a good show. You should be trying your best to do a good show, and just it's all connected. Just like with an improv scene, you're trying your best to do a scene, and the funnies you won't be able to help the funnies. If you're trying really hard to do a good scene, you can just mess up, or you're trying really hard, or putting a lot of pressure on it. Like you're questioning everything, you're thinking whether anything's good enough, you're chucking out ideas, you're rewriting what you're about to say next in your head, rather than just being in the process again. It's all this stuff. It's all this nonsense, Aaron, about meditation and mindfulness. It's that same thing. So I think that, and it doesn't become anything more than it is. It doesn't become anything more than the process of you being, like, if you're enjoying being on stage with people and discovering that you created something out of nothing that just made you laugh and was big and dumb and fun or serious and clever and interesting, whatever it is that you want to invest in. Like, if you're enjoying that, that's it. There isn't anything else to that. There's other ways you can perform it. There's other ways you might be able to perform it in bigger places, or do it in different ways, or play with different people, or get onto a team or whatever. But the experience of doing it doesn't change at all. Like, you're just in it doing it. And all of the best shows I ever have is where I'm just, all this creative stuff is so... We're all saying the same thing, whatever you're doing, a flow state of just trying to be in it and enjoy it. And that's it. That's all it is. And in a way, it should be the most sort of, for that reason, that's why it should be the most helpful for your mental health and stuff. Because unlike the pressure you can put on so many other things, about whether you succeed or whether that leads to this or leads to something else, and what's your plan to turn this into anything else, improv works at its best when you're not thinking about any of that stuff, and you've just got the next line in front of you. Put the show out of your head. You've just got the next line coming to you. You've just got whatever the next person says to you. It should be within, I keep saying this a lot at the moment, everything should be within easy reach. If you're tensing and thinking really hard about the scene, it's not, that, like, it doesn't need that sort of thought a lot of the time. Sometimes you do it because you're panicking, you want to fix it or whatever, but like, a good improv scene is easy peasy. You're not like, when you come away from a good improv scene that just made you all laugh and made the audience laugh, you're not going, you're not sweating. Good job, I worked so hard on that. Good work, I was tensing loads and making all that stuff work. It just came to you at your fingertips because you were just in it. You were in amongst it, and you were just playing and carefree and doing it. So performance-wise, there's a lot to be said for taking the pressure off, like when you're in it. But there's also, like, if you're doing this for an audience, like, you better care that you're going to do a good show. But that isn't for you in the scene. That's for you, like, before the show, after the show. Think about, was that good? Are we doing what we said we were going to do when we put this show on? Is the premise working of this show? Can we, like, that's the stuff where you need to be thinking about, put some care into it. It's not sort of like don't care, because you can watch teams and they don't care, and some teams will be incredible, and sometimes you're like, you do need to care more actually about this. I love the fact that you guys just don't care and you're just doing muckabouts, but like, I think you should probably care a little bit about this show. So there is a fine line between it, I think. But it's not going to, and again, this is all like life philosophy, it's not going to solve anything. Like, it's fun to do it, but like, having done it, it hasn't solved or changed anything particularly. And I think it's a great way to exercise so many good things for your approach to life. Your comedic voice, like learning about what characters you can play, like pushing yourself in certain ways, how you're comedic, what makes you laugh, the people you like working with, that can go on towards like how you write sketches, how you write comedy, how you perform stand-up, or whatever else it is that you want to do, like directing, producing, working with people to get good sort of comedy performance out of them, is just listening, communicating. All of this stuff is good that comes out of it. But yeah, and it's fun to throw yourself into it, but as soon as you're putting any pressure on, like, this has got to give you more than it can give you, is worth more than that's when it sort of becomes very difficult. And I say that having done that a lot, and I say that also with the privilege of being like the head teacher of the Free Association. So I generally just get to do shows, nice shows, and I've done it for long enough that like I'm a sort of, the pressure isn't, when I started doing it, the pressure was on me more. I felt the pressure more to be like, I've just been made the head teacher, so like, people better watch me and be like, that's why he's the head teacher. I'm like, if they watch me and are like, that guy's the head teacher, that guy's the head teacher, you want to, just the tone needs to be different, doesn't it? Because if they're like, that guy's the head teacher, you're like, I don't want that. But if they're like, that guy's the head teacher, you're like, great. So you can't, what I'm saying is, if they WhatsApp it, you don't know what it is they're feeling, but if you hear it, you get it. But there was a pressure on at the beginning of that, because I'm like, oh God, this better be good. Or even teaching a class, like, guys, I'm the head teacher, but I've got to tell you, I don't really know what I'm doing. It's like a caveat I want to put on it. But I've been doing it long enough now that I'm a proven sort of quantity at the FA. Whether you like me, or whether people listen to this actually like watching me perform or not, I don't like. The point is that the pressure's off for me. I'm not doing my first show as a house team I've just got into, or my first show that's on the FA stage, or like doing a jam. I have the luxury of, I went through a lot of those pressures before, so I do say that with the privilege of being like, it's just got to be this. But also from that point of view of being like, this is sort of like one of the only paid jobs as far as I'm aware, doing improv and doing shows where you might make a tiny bit of money from it. There's bigger ones, there's bigger shows that do a bit of touring and have like more sort of celebrity names on them, stuff that do improv that people get paid better for. But I'm like in a position where I'm like, I sometimes get a bit of money for doing a show or whatever, and for teaching. And that's about as good as it'll get, but it's still the same. You're going on stage and you're just going like, I love playing with these people. And then sometimes you go off stage and like, sorry, I was just being quite contrary or like mucking about a lot there. I probably wasn't putting as much care into it. But in the moment, you just got to listen and have joy and love for the people you're with and just be in it with them. Just be in it, mucking about in it with them. That's it. That doesn't change. So enjoy that, because that's it. That's all it is. It's nothing. There's no other. Don't worry about. I haven't been asked into this team. I've been asked to do this. Will I ever be asked to do this type of show? As we all know this as well. We all know this from endless like mental health, mindfulness, Buddhism podcasts that we'll have listened to and self-help books we've read. We know the process. Enjoy the process. But I think that is why improv is a good one to like work on. Just work on enjoying that in the moment. I think that's it.
Who do you look to for inspiration?
I think that like, and I guess without it sounding too sort of like too wanky, is just that it is just watching comedy performances. Often there's stuff I find inspiring or stuff I want to learn or stuff that I'm like, that's good, I like that. And you've got to just start enjoying watching comedy and watching performance stuff and watching classes. And if you coach or you teach or whatever, it's like enjoy watching the people you are watching and enjoy learning things from what people will do. You're like, I've never done that before. That's a really funny way of putting that or doing. They'll make you think about like your own performance. There's obviously people that I perform with a lot who I think are incredible, like at the FA, and like pretty much everyone that I perform with, I'm learning from the way everyone performs in a slightly different way, and you just pick up little things. You're like, that's a really funny way of putting that. It's not that you're going to go, I'm going to emulate that or copy that, but you're like, that made me laugh a lot. I enjoyed how that worked, or I really like was inspired by like the way that scene went. And then again, the same thing in classes, especially when it's like coaching or teaching. You're like, that stuff that makes you laugh a lot it's great and inspiring to be like impressed by what you're watching, like regardless. So I don't have a specific. Do people normally go like this person? There's one person. Are they as general and broad?
That's the first time I've asked that question.
Oh, is
actually, it? Yeah. I'm slowly developing my catalogue of questions. Okay. So you're the guinea pig for that.
But you can, great. I think there is like, because you watch something like TJ and Dave, and be like, I love how like the time they take, the care they take, and the sort of investment they put into this whole show is great. And then you watch shows that are like big and dumb and fun. I love how big and dumb and fun that show was. That was incredible. I watched a Convoy at the Edinburgh Improv Festival not that long ago. I was up. It was just like, they just consistently were like funny in every scene with big silly things that they just weren't afraid to constantly jump on, justify, invest in, and like make sense. And then they're onto something else. And you're like, that's great. I think you'll probably find, if you like any of this stuff, I do this all the time, where I'll like the most recent show I've watched is how I want to perform. I'm like, I want to perform like that. I want to do a show like that. And I watch another show, but like, no, I want to perform like that. That's great. I love that. And I watch something else, but I wish I could perform like that. But yeah, that's my very broad answer. For you, Aram, is there anyone, who do you find, I feel like I should ask you some questions. Who do you find, or what do you find inspiring watching or doing?
I think for a while now, since I saw TJ and Dave when they came to London, I saw them too many times. I think I really found that incredibly inspiring, because it felt like improv as art. It felt like more than just a funny show. It felt like something theatrical. It felt like something that if someone had written it, you'd probably been like, that was all right.
Yeah.
And the fact that they're improvising it there is amazing. But I also saw that Convoy show, and that was also really inspiring. And just like you, I was like, oh yeah, maybe I should try and do a show like that, like really like big, dumb and funny. And I think it's, like you, I think there's so many different amazing types of improv.
And like because that's what Fluff is doing. It's more like commitment to and investing in characters. From when I've seen you perform, it's like trying to like sit in these characters for a bit longer and not just jump on the first funny thing and be off out of there. Just actually sit and develop it. Yeah,
we have tried to adapt a little bit of the TJ and Dave style into a group setting, which turns out hard. But yeah, so we focus more on character and a very sort of a light touch narrative, and it all happens in one location, close quarters style thing. And that brings with it some freedom as well to not be funny, because you're often trying to be interesting. And Yeah, it's, I think an interesting thing I've noticed in the last couple of shows is that often shows, if the audience is quiet and the performers start to panic, it will start to get more gaggy, more like desperate joke type stuff, which makes it worse. Whereas I think when you're doing that style of improv, your fallback is just that you're being real and playing characters and following the sort of dramatic side of it, which I think makes for a better baseline show, even if you don't get as many laughs as you might in another show, or your audience is quiet, at least you feel confident that they're engaged because of what you're doing on stage.
Yeah, and I think that's it, right? It's taking the pressure off of like gags and flippancy and a lack of commitment. That's the sort of like not being funny. I'm saying, I'm trying to get to that same thing. If worst case scenario, your audience are like engaged for the first half of the scene before you find what that funny thing is, like great, like, that's a great place. Like they'll wait. Audiences trust you. Audiences want to be like put at ease and know that you've got it and you're handling it and it's fine. And if you're just committed and playing it and not worrying about making gags, like panicking and making gags, like puts an audience off. You can smell the sort of like fear in the performer or whatever that puts them off, and flippant tendencies towards flippancy as well, which is just like the death of like good sort of comedy scenes and stuff, because you're relying on like gags out to the audience rather than like being in the scene or whatever. It's diminishing returns. So yeah, I find that's often what I'm trying to remind people of. I'm doing that workshop because I think that you're right. If it's a quieter audience, like they'll still be engaged with the show and think that you did a great performance. And also when you get those laughs, they're usually bigger because you haven't like panickingly tried to do a bunch before them. I think I watched you do one recently and it was like a smaller, quieter audience we were doing it at. But like you got some really big laughs at like, it's like you just got some actual big laughs during parts of the scenes where something just landed because of the commitment you put into the characters, I think, that you were doing.
On the flip side, though, having done that a lot now, and that be my focus, I'm now like, I would like to do a big, dumb, funny show. I think there is like part of you need to sort of almost fulfill different aspects of your improv personality, and sometimes a big, dumb, funny show actually is just a nice, fun relief. Yeah.
But I think that that's a nice way of like essentially it's just trying to honor both sides of those things as like as a comedic performer, isn't it? Trying to hit like the serious bits better be serious and the funny bits better be funny. That's if you're going to do the funny bit, it better be. If you're going to do, I'm always like, if you're saying you're doing a comedy show, then make sure it's funny. That's the care about trying to make it funny and stuff. But it's funnier by virtue of like how much effort you're often trying not to be funny and often trying to invest in it. But I'll still find it, even in I think like Groundhog is, which I do with Alison Scott and Jim Archer and Naomi Peterson, is just big, silly, dumb fun. But there'll be points in that show where I'm like, I'm maybe losing track a little bit. I'm going to just invest in the scene. I'll still try and snap into like, I'm just going to invest and say something that I care about in the scene, because that I can feel that's in front of me and I can feel that and I can do that, but I can't if things have ramped up a little bit. And it can still feel now a bit like, oh, I'm the one not being funny in the scene or whatever. And you're like, it's like the audience will wait. They'll take it. You sometimes are just going to get a little lull or whatever. They're not like, wait a second, this hasn't been funny on every single line. They're like, cool, okay, I'm going to wait for the next funny thing to come up again.
If you find yourself in a scene that maybe isn't going anywhere and it's just a bit sticky, do you have like a hack or a trick that you use to help yourself out of that moment?
I think it is. I'm trying to just be more honest, I think, in the scene. I'm just trying to do it. And I'm trying not to do it. And by that, I don't mean not winking at the audience being like, this isn't going very well, is it, guys? But I'll sort of like, there'll usually be some sort of energy in the scene that I'm like, something's a little bit off here. Because if you're just committed and you're in it and you're just invested in what your two characters are talking about, often, even if it's not getting laughs, it's not sticky. It feels like it's moving and you feel like the momentum going. But often I think that's what sticky is, and we think about it in terms of like, you're not being funny enough, or the panic can be like, I'm not being funny. That's the problem. I'm not getting any laughs. Because really, there's an issue with the momentum of this scene in some way. Like maybe you stopped yes-adding, maybe you're arguing, maybe you're not making choices anymore. But like the more you can tap into just being truthful, for me, like truthfully, honestly saying, calling out that like feeling in some way that feels real in the scene, not in a like wink to the audience. This is weird, isn't it? Even just calling out like, but things that are like, look, listen, I feel like we're talking at cross purposes, or I feel like or like this relationship isn't working, is it? Something like that's why you sometimes get those lines and scenes, because they feel like they know there's something's off a little bit, and you're trying to find what it is, and that is just listening again. I think, Aaron, that is just you're trying to be so finely attuned to what's going on in the scene that when it's not working, you're like, and again, by not working, I don't mean not being funny, because that doesn't mean your scene is tanking. That, as long as you're being engaging and it feels real and it feels engaging, and what you're doing, it feels like it has weight and commitment and you care about it. But if you can feel like the momentum's off in some way, there's something you can say in that scene that is like addressing it. There's probably, you're listening, you're just yes-anding the reality of that world in some way. So it is almost, I guess, like you're back to basics, but you're also just like, there's something, if it feels sticky, there's something there. There is something interesting there that is happening. And it may be that you're both trying to be two real characters, but you actually just sound a bit weird, and you're not talking actually how real people talk. And it takes a little, the bubble bursting is a little bit of genuine authenticity from how your character's feeling that will just pop it and get you into the scene properly. And you're not even saying it for a laugh necessarily, but saying it as a sort of, there's a bit of a relief to be like, I'm into the scene, because there'll be something there. And I do find that's really interesting. Again, like, it's hard if you know a lot of stuff. You're often like a Rolodex in your head. Have we got game? What's the reality? Is the ground of reality there? Okay, is the game there? What's the game? We found the game. Who's got a point of view? Maybe I don't have this. Maybe I should do some space work. Something you might be panicking thinking about. But the honesty is that you're feeling something. You're feeling some sort of energy. There's some sort of like there's a little bit of grit in the machine that you're like, we've picked up on something. And actually, if you can focus on that, and it will be like being honest. That's the answer, I think. And by being honest, I think that a lot of good acting, improv, stand-up comedy across the board is learning to be better in touch and honest with yourself about why you're doing certain things. It's all, again, it's connected. It's therapy and mindfulness again. Finding out why are you doing that thing? What is actually going on? And sometimes it's just a very boring emotion, or you think it's boring. I ask this to students sometimes, and I'm like, what's your character feeling? And they'll give me a very long explanation about what they're thinking. I think it's this and this. I'm like, to me, it looks like you're angry. You look like you're angry. Can I tell you that? I know you've got a very complicated, long reason that you think is the answer, but it's actually just that you're like, it's sometimes just saying, there's noticing like there's a stickiness in the scene, and just saying, I tell you something, I'm really angry. I think I'm angry with you for this or whatever. You're suddenly like, oh, I get it. There's something that to get out of it. So the answer is, if it's sticky, there's something there. Like, really listen really closely, really figure out like something is just slightly off kilter, and that's actually could be really fascinating with the scene, rather than, it's not something you need to fix, it's actually something you need to like understand. You're not like, fix it, do this quick thing, like tape this onto this and make that, there we go, we've solved it, we've papered over something. You're like, figure that, feel out what it is, and be honest about what it sounds like. Or if it sounds like the other character sounds like frustrated or bored or whatever it is, and saying that to them. But you're ultimately listening and then saying what is happening in the scene. But sometimes it takes ages and ages to be able to relax enough in a scene to just go, oh, it's right in front of me. It is right in front of me. I can see it, and I'm going to say it. That would be my thing.
What do you like to do outside of improv?
That's a great question. What do I like to do? And I've got to like it? Okay.
I could ask you, what do you hate doing that you still do?
You're somehow compelled to do. Outside of it, I really like making music. I enjoy making music a lot. Whether that's, I went through a phase of making like synthwave music on my computer, or like some EDM music. I find really satisfying to put together. But also I've got an acoustic guitar, and just making up songs on acoustic guitar or learning songs, and that is really, really satisfying. That's sort of what generally like, but it's funny even that you're like, how can I monetize this? Could I release this? This is not supposed to be a job. This is supposed to be something you do to relax. But like, you get so, as with all this stuff, as we were talking about improv, you're like, what's the end goal of this? What do I get when I do really well at improv and someone gives me a bigger show, and then I'll be satisfied. Even when it's like, I just love doing that. I find it very meditative to just be involved making music. I find it really satisfying. But even with that, yeah, you can end up being like, maybe I could release these and I can put them out. I'll do something with these. Like, why? What do I want from that? What am I expecting it's going to happen? So that I enjoy a lot. I like music a lot. And yeah, and also like I've got 2 kids, and they're very fun to play with, and like finding ways to playfully muck about with them, I find really, really fun to do as well, when they sort of catch on to like a stupid bit you're doing. And it's It's just dad jokes, and I don't know why. I know even if you're self-aware enough to understand what you're doing, you're like, it's just addictive. It's not, the jokes are just dad jokes or me pretending to be confused by something very simple that they get very frustrated with. And that makes me laugh. What about you, Aram, outside of improv? What do you enjoy doing?
What do I enjoy doing outside improv? I enjoy looking after my houseplants.
You've got lovely houseplants.
Yeah,
you gave me and Ali a houseplant, which is doing very well. Thank you.
Good, glad to hear it. Yeah. I'm not sure when, but I just seem to have ended up with a lot of plants that keep multiplying because I can't help myself but let them. But once they grow and I cut a bit off. I feel too bad to throw in the bin. I'm like, well, I know I could just put this in water and it will grow a whole new plant.
Yeah.
And so I have to do that. But the problem with that is that I end up with too many, especially of the same plant.
Yeah.
But then I get to give them to people, which is always really nice.
Yeah. So it was really, we were doing you a favour, really.
Absolutely, yeah. It was absolutely. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Do you think improv has informed fatherhood?
I think that, I think it attunes you to play. You're into playing more, I think. Like all of my friends who I do improv with, and friends I had like outside before improv, I realised that, again, like talking about having a sort of predisposition towards it, is like my friends were generally quite silly and we'd just make stupid jokes and muck about a lot, like where you're doing bits, and then all the friends I have that through improv, it's often just doing silly bits and playing stupid characters or finding little stupid games you're doing in the conversation or whatever, or being like being the voice of reason to each other about some silly opinion we've got, or whatever. Like it's all just constantly playing. It's not, and it is insufferable to be around everyone who's listening. It's insufferable. If you're not part of it, it must be insufferable. But that's all you're doing with kids, is you're just learning to like be a bit silly and play a little bit. I think that with kids, a lot of people feel like this all links back to sort of your comedic voice, I think, as well. I think if you're doing a lot of improv, you're learning how you can be on stage and be funny, and everyone does it differently, and you can think it's being big and clowny and loud, and like there are people who are great at that, like off the bat they're great at that stuff. There's people who can learn to be more like that. There's people that will find that harder to learn than other people. There's people that find that more difficult and have to work at it more, but it can be helped. But that's not the only way of doing it. There's people who play really big characters who can learn to be smaller, but all you're doing a lot of the time, and by doing lots of improv scenes and being in the process and figuring it on the fly, I think it is so useful for learning what you find funny and how you as you can make that funny. And even if you're a character, like how much of you is informing that and doing the things that you find fun in some way. And then with kids, I think people feel like you've got to be like a children's TV presenter who are like endlessly enthusiastic for stuff. But you'll find there are ways that you can play without having to shift your personality suddenly to something else. And that's the same in improv, same in stand-up. Like people talk about it like you find your voice. And it's that. And the same thing applies like playing with kids. I think people who don't know how to be silly think it's because silly is only the sort of like CBBS version of being a silly children's entertainer, which is great. Some people can do that. It's incredible. But it's also you don't have to be like that. Like kids don't have to be sort of entertained like that. And you should be making yourself laugh, I think, as well. And you learn how to do that, I think, in as much as you're playing with kids. And then you're playing with them rather than entertaining them as like an entertainer or whatever. Yeah.
Any plans to start a farm?
I know quite a lot about farms, actually. You should only plough one furrow. That's the first thing. So what I'm saying is I could. I'm too busy though, I think, but I would do. Yeah. And it sounds easy. From what I know of it, and from you saying about how plants just multiply after a time, I think I could handle that. Yeah.
And on that note, Alex Holland, thank you so much for being on the show.
Thank you for having me, Aaron. Thank you for letting me wang on about improv for ages. I appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to the Shiny Things podcast. Don't forget to head over to shinythingscomedy.com for loads more improv related posts, where you can sign up to our newsletter so you get all of our new content straight to your inbox. Until next time, I've been Aaron Balaction. Happy improving.